How the US and Israel attack Iran inside Operation Epic Fury. How did the US and Israel launch a preemptive strike against Iran? Well, they used a devastating tactic called time on target. With 2 aircraft carriers and a fleet of destroyers, they calculated the exact math, so Israeli jets and US cruise missiles hit their marks at the exact same second. Israel's main goal is assassinating Khamenei and the top leadership, while the US pounded military targets and other high-value industry. But why did Iranian air defenses fail to activate? Because the US fights with a different kind of technology, using electronic warfare from space, sea, and air. They completely blinded the Iranian radar just as destroyers launched a swarm of cruise missiles to wipe out the anti-air systems. But wait, the war is still not over. Iran still has thousands of ballistic missiles and drones, so they hit American and Middle East allied bases. And right now, almost everyone is an open target. On the 28th of February 2026, the United States and Israel launched a major coordinated military offensive against Iran. Israeli officials have called their offensive Operation Roar the Lion, while the US operation has been referred to as Operation Epic Fury. The message behind the Israel and US strike was clear. This wasn't just a show of force. This was a targeted move to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran. As stated, this wasn't just a random military strike. The ultimate target was the supreme leader's own compound. Missiles dialed in on highly sensitive areas, specifically around University Street, the Jamhuri district, and near past Astor Street. If you know the layout of Tehran, you know exactly what this means. This zone isn't just another neighborhood. It is the absolute nerve center of the Iranian government. It houses the primary day-to-day offices of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But here's the catch. The IDF says they got him, and Iranian military says Khamenei was not inside his offices when the missiles actually made an impact. The strike may have leveled the compound, but the target slipped away. And right now, the entire region is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. But reports say Israel says Khamenei's body has been found, and he is confirmed dead. Listen, that first wave, it didn't hold back, not even a little. We're talking about a perfectly synchronized, overwhelming assault. The entire goal was to blind and cripple the regime all at once. First, they hit Karaj, just completely ripping through their critical industrial and aerospace hubs. Then Tehran, the capital, rocked. Any illusion of safety they had was just completely shattered. They didn't stop there. They struck Qom, sending absolute shockwaves right through the ideological heart of the country. And if you follow this stuff, you know exactly how heavily fortified that area is. Over in the west, missiles literally rained down on Kermanshah. They neutralized those launch sites before the operators could even think about powering up their radars. And then there's Isfahan, the absolute crown jewel of their nuclear and drone programs. Heavily defended? Didn't matter. It just lit up the night sky. But how did the US and Israel actually pull off a preemptive strike on Iran? First of all, look at this map. To make this happen, they didn't just rely on local land bases. They brought 2 massive floating cities right to Iran's doorstep. Down in the Arabian Sea, you've got the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group bearing down on the south and east. And over in the eastern Mediterranean, the biggest, newest ship, USS Gerald R. Ford. While Israeli jets flew all the way across the Middle East to reach Iranian airspace, timing was absolutely critical. The moment those IDF jets reached their marks, the missiles were released. And that brings us to the most terrifying, complicated part of this entire operation, the synchronization. Military planners rely on a tactic called time on target. You have missiles firing from submarines, cruise missiles launching from escort ships, and massive payload drops from stealth bombers. They are all deploying from completely different locations at entirely different times. But here is the genius of it. The US military machine was mathematically choreographed, so everything impacted Karaj, Qom, Kermanshah, and Isfahan at the exact same second the Israeli jets dropped their guided bombs. It was designed to be a total systemic shock, a move to collapse the regime instantly. When those munitions finally hit, it was pure shock and awe. But why did the Iranian air defenses fail to activate? Well, to put it simply, the US military operates in a completely different league. Using a highly advanced mix of electronic warfare and cyber operations coordinated from space to the ground, the coalition was able to inject false data directly into Iranian radar screens. Top-tier Iranian air defense systems like their homegrown Bavar and their Russian-supplied batteries were absolutely overwhelmed by this electronic assault. But to actually hunt them down, the US set a brilliant trap. They launched hundreds of ADM-160 mauled miniature air-launched decoys. To a panicked Iranian radar operator staring at a chaotic screen, these tiny drones look exactly like a massive squadron of F-15S or F-16S screaming toward the capital. With the door kicked wide open, 5th-generation stealth fighters, including both US and Israeli F-35S with possible F-22 Raptors, sliced through the airspace completely undetected. Ultimately, the Iranian air defense network wasn't just suppressed, it was completely dismantled, at least for the time period. Because the Iranians do have huge firepower, Tehran has fired back in Operation Truthful Promise 4. A massive wave of missiles and drones just targeted US bases and Israel. Here's the fallout. The UAE's Al Dhafra airbase was hit, leaving one dead from shrapnel. In Bahrain, the US Navy's 5th Fleet HQ was directly targeted. Qatar's air defenses successfully wiped out incoming missiles, while Kuwait locked down its entire airspace under heavy fire. Meanwhile, nationwide sirens are blasting across Israel, with massive mid-air interceptions, lighting up the skies over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Promotion for Surfshark VPN from 0 hours 6 minutes and 13 seconds to 0 hours 7 minutes and 1 seconds. But how did Israel manage to fly all the way to Iran? At 9:0 inches the morning, Israel launched more than a dozen aircraft, but it's a complicated process. They have to navigate or entirely bypass the airspace of neighboring countries like Syria and Iraq. To avoid hostile air defenses, analysts estimate the actual flight distance to reach central Iran is between 930 and 1,240 miles each way. Although these routes may seem straightforward, they involve complex planning, including calculations for air refueling and coordinating attack aircraft to pass through Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. The Israel and US strategy was to attack Iran in 3 waves. The first wave targeted surface air-to-air sites, radar installations, and Iran's air defense headquarters in Tehran, Elam, and Khuzestan. The second wave focused on destroying ballistic missiles, and finally, the third wave targeted military manufacturing industries. Kicking down the door, the attack begins not with manned aircraft, but with robotic precision from the sea. The goal is simple: blind the enemy's eyes, radars, and silence their voice, command and control. In the Persian Gulf and the northern Arabian Sea, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, ships like the USS Thomas Hoodner, received the launch order. The vertical launch system cells open, and moments later, dozens of Tomahawk land attack missiles erupt from the decks. These missiles fly at subsonic speeds, hugging the terrain in what we call nap of the Earth flight to stay below the radar horizon. They are programmed to loiter and strike simultaneously. Their warheads slam into S-300 and S-400 radar sites and command bunkers. They degrade the integrated air defense system, effectively carving out safe corridors for the pilots who are minutes behind them. 30 minutes past hour H, while the Tomahawks are still impacting, the silver bullets of the US Air Force are already deep inside hostile airspace. These are the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. With the air defense network fractured by Tomahawk cruise missiles, usually fired from destroyers hundreds of miles away, the path is now clear. Now comes the strategic sites like nuclear bunkers, which can be bombed by B-2 Spirits. Launching from bases in Jordan and the UAE, squadrons of F-15E Strike Eagles roar into the theater. These are the bomb trucks of the operation. Each F-15 is heavily laden with JDAMs and small-diameter bombs. Interestingly, it can carry up to 19 JDAMs or 28 small-diameter weapons. While the B-2S hit the deep bunkers, the F-15S hunt the mobile targets. Their AESA radars scan the ground for ballistic missile launchers hiding in valleys. Working in pairs, they drop precision bombs on missile convoys, hangars, and secondary command nodes. Once they are Winchester out of ammo or low on fuel, they don't go home yet. They connect to tanker tracks established in Phase 1, taking on thousands of pounds of jet fuel in midair before turning back for a second sortie. 2 hours past hour H, to sustain the pressure, the US Navy's floating air bases enter the fight. Cruising in the Arabian Sea, a carrier strike group turns into the wind. Steam and electromagnetic catapults begin launching aircraft every 30 seconds. F/A-18 Super Hornets launch carrying anti-radiation missiles. Their job is SED, dead, suppression, destruction of enemy air defenses. They are hunting down any surviving radar operators foolish enough to turn their systems on. Meanwhile, F-35C Lightnings push forward to gather intelligence and strike high-threat targets that older jets cannot reach. Orbiting far behind them are the E-2 Hawkeyes, the quarterbacks in the sky, managing the massive traffic of hundreds of US jets. By sunrise, the first wave is over. The eyes of the enemy air defense have been blinded by Tomahawks. The heart of the nuclear program has been crushed by B-2S, and the limbs of the missile forces have been severed by F-15S and carrier aircraft.